Good morning, everybody. If we could please gather. Or actually, I think you might be able to see us wherever you are because we need to leave a little space here. Oh, no, we don't. We've got a stage. I'm up on stage. It's too early. Thank you so much for having us here at your event, the official launch of the lawyer season, basically. And I just wanted to say a huge thank you to you guys because you do such a wonderful job in all the different fields of lawyership, all my own language, thank you, because it is a field, look, whatever you call yourselves, whatever part of lawyership that you work in, especially with children, things and families like that, I really applaud you for all that you do. It is a hard job and you've worked hard to get to where you're at, and I appreciate you. My name's Mandy. I'm a Wurundjeri woman, so a traditional custodian of Naarm of Melbourne. So are you all based in Melbourne? Yep. Some from other places, maybe? Some? So traditional custodian is a little bit different to traditional owner, if you may have heard of that term before. I prefer to use custodian because custodian, you can't misinterpret what that means. And custodian actually, as we all know, means that you look after and caretake for something. So me as a traditional custodian, it's my cultural responsibility to look after people while they're visiting, working, living on Wurundjeri country. And what that means and how I do that is I welcome you here, but it's all about reciprocation. So if I say you're all welcome here and I acknowledge elders past, present and emerging, that's not enough, because what it actually means to welcome someone somewhere is that you must follow our way of connecting to country and connecting to others. So if I welcome you here, it's your responsibility to give back to me. And what I mean by that is I perform ceremonies, I do things like that, but it means that I'll go back to me, because it's all about me this morning, right? It's all about me looking after you in terms of spirituality, and that's ceremony, like smoking ceremonies and things like that, and giving you a little snapshot of how we as Wurundjeri people remain connected to our culture and spirituality when we live in an urban environment. So the things that you can give back to me, I look after self, country, others. You look after country and self while you're on Wurundjeri country. So that's how we can reciprocate that caring for each other and caring for country. So, like simple things like throwing a cigarette butt or a piece of rubbish on the ground, that's not caring for country. So if we all work together, we can make country as healthy as possible in a crazy world, because at the moment, as we know, the world is not healthy, the waterways and everything really isn't healthy. So we just need to work together to do that. So that's what the cultural responsibilities back and forth represent. So our welcome ceremony is a ceremony that has happened since the beginning of time, but a lot of our other ceremonies didn't happen. And one of those ceremonies is called the Murum Turukuruk, or coming of age ceremony. And it's about getting our young women and girls together, teaching them cultural responsibilities, a little bit of what I've already said to you, and making sure that they stay on that cultural path, that cultural integrity. And if they decide that they don't want to be part of that, we take their belts away. You'll see when the girls get up, they've got possum skin belts. We teach them how to make those belts, how to collect the materials for their necklaces. But the main reason is to give them cultural responsibility of our younger girls. So they become the mentors and the leaders in their community. And it's something that hadn't happened for over 185 years, because all over the world, as we know, in the 1800s, invasion happened in many countries. I think over 200 countries in the world alone were invaded by Britain. So what we've had to do as First Peoples is to reclaim language, ceremony and culture, essentially, and identity, because that was sort of taken from us. So that's one ceremony that we've brought back from the brink. And since we did that ceremony in 2015, we've had over, I change this number all the time, but it's about 40 young girls go through that ceremony. And we include our young babies as well, because that gives them that firm cultural foundation to navigate this crazy world that each generation, as we know, gets worse and worse. And what I mean by that is there's so much things that are accessible to our young ones these days through the internet that we didn't have access to when we were younger. So it's really scary for them. So we need to ground them before they can enter this, crazy life as a young person. And then they're set for life. So when I welcome people to country, I like to talk a little bit about where I stand, who I am, where I fit into the world, but also how we can connect and embrace a beautiful ancient culture in a modern context. And when I welcome people to country, it isn't about, like I said before, welcome and embrace all the elders past, present and emerging. It's not about that. That's just the fluffy words. What it actually is I'm welcoming you to country, but I'm giving you a snapshot of how we look at country and how you can connect yourselves to country. So the 6 layers of country. The bikut is below country. That's where we get the ochre that you'll see the girls wearing. We wear it when we celebrate, when we do our ceremonies. We trade it still. Then we've got Bikdui, which is on country, where we balance all our crazy work, sporting, family life with our spiritual life. No matter what background you're from, you'll have some form of spirituality. Sometimes it may be hidden or you try to avoid it, but it is there. You can't get rid of it. Then we've got Banyabik, which is water country. So water forms part of everything that's living, as we know. Then we've got Murnmutbik, which is wind country, that blows the smoke from our welcoming fires, but also our ngulu, or our voice, all the way up to Bunjil, our creator. And then we've got Darangolbik. So Darang is tree, Golk is stick, and Biik is country, and that's star country. And that's where we see our creator in his spiritual form as the star Altair, part of the Aquila constellation, which means eagle. So I could talk all morning, but I won't. But I just wanted to give you a little bit of background of what we do, how we do it, and how we make ourselves visible in this crazy world of all these buildings and concrete and everything. We are here, we are loud, we are proud. So, Biladu Nyan Wangat Naranik Mandi, Waranjeri Willamik, Waranjeri Balakut, Mundanai Murup Galad Birang, Mundanai Kiripik, Mundanai Bupup Nakurenik, Balalal Ba Gugung Nugulik, Ba Bikut, Bikdui, Banyabik, Murnmutbik, Wururubik, Ba Darangokbik, Ba Bunjalal Willamu. So what I said in my mother tongue, the Woiwurrung language, is everything that I mentioned, but it was embracing all of my elders, my ancestors, and also the different beautiful layers of country. So I welcome you again with those obligations of caring for self and country while you're here. And one quick way that you can connect to country is get a gum leaf, look at the veins in that gum leaf, and then realise, okay, they've got veins. Then you realise that your arms have got veins. Then you think of a bigger picture. The veins of country are the waterways. Grab that leaf, crush it up and smell it. So you've connected in 2 different ways, visually and in your senses through your smell. So we're going to do 2 dances. The first dance is our Womanjika Nyarka, a welcome dance. So Womanjika, woman means to come. Ji is an instruction of being asked to come. And ka is purpose. And this is all about us being loud and proud of who we are. And you hear ngagaji, which means hear us in the Woiwurrung language. Waranjere, Waranjere al Naramo. Waranjere, Waranjere al Naramo. Waranjere, Waranjere al Naramo. Bombocho Maninga. Bombocho Maninga. Wangan you know, do la pagaruk. Wangan you know, do la pagaruk. Nagaje, 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 Nagaje. Wangan you know, do la pagaruk. Wangan you know, do la pagaruk. Nagaje, 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 Nagaje. Win Maleo, Coreno. Thank you. Let's have a quick sip of water. Whoop. And now, are you right with Babandarang? Yep. Just had to ask permission from the pregnant lady if she was okay to do a certain dance because there's a bit of bending. So this one is about the Babandarang, the mother tree, and it's a metaphorical comparison between the life of something, the long life of something, how something else tried to destroy that, but it still lives. So it's about how this tree, or bial, big red gum tree, grew for hundreds of years. And over those years, she watched harmony all around her, animals, plants, everything was beautiful and healthy. And then something came along which represents invasion, and she was chopped down. But her roots were deep enough to keep that trunk alive. So the roots represent language, the trunk represents the elders, the shoots coming out of the side of the trunk represent community leaders, and the seeds that she dropped represent the little bubups, or the babies, the next generations coming up. So this is Babandarang, the mother tree, and it's all about cultural survival. Babandarang, Babandarang. Kamaje, 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 terandil. Waibu, 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 waibu. Babanda, 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 babanda. Mundanai, 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 mundanai. Marambin, 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 marambin. Babambinda, 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 babambinda. Murapin, 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 murapin. Murenda, 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 murenda. Marambin, 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 marambin. Bale babam, bale babam, bale babam, bale babam, bale babam. Mulago, mulago, mulago. Nungojin, thank you and enjoy the rest of your day.
Good morning to everyone. What a wonderful morning it is too. Sunny and cool, and not like some of these breakfasts when I remember a sea of colourful umbrellas all the way across the laneway. This is our 21st annual legal laneway breakfast. I'm Justice Greg Gard, the Chair of the Victoria Law Foundation. And I'd like to thank our dancers, Mandy, Tina and Dana, for their very special acknowledgement to country. Jiri Jiri Dancers are a Wurundjeri dance group, the traditional custodians of Naarm or Melbourne. Jiri Jiri means willy wagtail in Woi Wurrung, the language of the Wurundjeri people. The willy wagtail is the spirit bird that gave the Wurundjeri dance. I thank Victorian women lawyers and the Victorian Bar for sponsoring Jiri Jiri's performance this morning. Well, it's wonderful to have a full house of acceptances. 700 people accepted attendance at this breakfast. Not quite as many here, I noticed, but nonetheless 700 acceptance was wonderful. And of course, there are 100 and more online. I extend a very warm welcome to you all. This event was designed to enable legal professionals to come together in a convivial way to mark the beginning of the legal year. Lynn and I are delighted to be joined today by three special guests: our Attorney General, Jacqueline Symes MP, Fiona Macleay, the Victoria Legal Services Board Chief Executive Officer and Commissioner, and Professor Nigel Balmer, Inaugural Research Director at the Victoria Law Foundation. And we look forward very much to hearing their insights. I would like to acknowledge some of the leaders of the legal community who are with us this morning. Chief Justice Debbie Mortimer of the Federal Court of Australia, Chief Justice Will Ostergren of the Federal Circuit and Family Court, Justice Mordy Bromberg of the Federal Court of Australia and the President of the Australian Law Reform Commission, Justice Melinda Richards of the Supreme Court of Victoria, Judges Anna Robertson, Kate Hawkins and Liz Brimmer of the County Court of Victoria, Magistrates Donna Bakos and Vince Caltabiano of the Magistrates Court of Victoria, and my long-standing friend, Mr Tony North, KC, now Chair of the Yoorrook Justice Commission, whilst on leave as Chair of the Victorian Law Reform Commission and previously, of course, a Federal Court Judge, Ro Allen, our Victorian Human Rights Commissioner, and Paul Dorr, our Juries Commissioner. We have had an absolutely outstanding response from CEOs, executive directors and managers of courts, professional and kindred organisations and community legal centres. I'm not going to read out your names, there are 25 of you, and I'm well aware that our Auslan interpreter has to deal with names letter by letter. I am not going to inflict that on you. I also welcome my co-directors, Ro McRae, Belinda Lowe and Peter Calliard, and the very many staff of the Victorian Law Foundation who are present with us. I now turn to introduce our principal speaker, the Attorney General. It is a great privilege to have the Attorney General with us for this breakfast, and particularly given her many commitments. As we are all aware, Jacqueline became the Attorney General in December 2020 and continued in the role after the 2022 election. She is also the Minister for Emergency Services, itself a very busy and demanding portfolio, and the government leader in the Legislative Council. She is the Upper House member for Northern Victoria, a large electorate stretching from the South Australian border to past Albury, taking in Bendigo, Macedon and the Yan Yean area. So she is very familiar with the issues faced in accessing justice right across Victoria. She is our principal speaker at Legal Laneway Breakfasts and is a consistent supporter of the Victorian Law Foundation, for which I again thank her. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Attorney.
Thank you so much, Greg, and good morning, everyone. And of course, I would like to commence by acknowledging Mandy and the amazing dancers, and thank you so much for your thoughtful reflection. And of course, I extend my deep and personal respects to Aboriginal elders past, present and emerging, and I also extend that to any Aboriginal elders or custodians from other communities who may be joining us today. I do want to also recognise Aboriginal spiritual, material and economic connections to land, water and resources, and Mandy did touch on a lot of those issues, and I thank her for commencing the day with that important reflection. Thank you, Justice Guard, for your warm welcome as always, and indeed the time that you took to go through the introduction of many of the important guests here today. You'll appreciate it. It's a rather intimidating crowd when you go through that list of people in the legal sector. I'm going to call it, this is the last day you're allowed to say Happy New Year. So to everyone here today, I extend my happiness of New Year's for 2024 today. Look, it's great to see so many faces here today. Some are new, but as Justice Guard has reflected, I've been in the role, this is my 4th Laneway breakfast now, so it's great to see so many familiar faces in the crowd as well. And that's because not only my attendance here at Laneway the Laneway Festival, for all of the young crowd here, the Laneway breakfast. It's a terrific event, but I do use this as an opportunity to connect with people to ensure that I am face-to-face with people from the legal sector throughout the year. And it has been a privilege in between these events to meet so many of you. It is always something that I value, speaking to people who are on the ground day in, day out, delivering justice for Victorians. I'm sure you would appreciate that it's not always broadly acknowledged, but I certainly know that the legal profession makes an immense positive social, economic and political contribution to society. I really enjoy hearing about the important work you do, and I welcome the valuable contribution many of you have made to government policy development and problem solving. The Laneway Breakfast is of course an opportunity to socialise and connect. I know there's pancakes, it's a great way to start the day, but it also allows us to take stock of what our profession has achieved over the past year and to consider what we hope to achieve as we set out the legal year for 2024. And I've got to say, I've actually interrupted some of those exciting conversations that I've heard this morning about what is in store for this year. So this morning I would like to give you an update on some of the things that the government's focused on, some of the things that are occupying my time, keeping me awake at night, I've got to say. But the work that we are doing to ensure that the justice system continues to be fairer, fit for purpose and more accessible. Overarchingly, many of us agree, if not all, that Victorians deserve a justice system that is more transparent, more efficient and more responsive. A justice system that upholds the rights of all Victorians and protects the most vulnerable. Last year we made it a criminal offence to intentionally perform the Nazi salute in public after already making it an offence to display the Nazi hate symbol. Whilst I absolutely wish that making these laws wasn't necessary, our government will always tackle anti-Semitism, hatred and racism head on. It's through this lens and a desire to promote community cohesion and safety that we continue this important work this year through ambitious plans to strengthen Victoria's anti-vilification laws and to better address and prevent discrimination, hate speech and all forms of vilification. We've been working closely with the multicultural and faith communities, members of the LGBTIQ+ community and other advocates to determine the best way to implement and progress these important reforms that deliver greater civil protections and criminal responses, all whilst ensuring that the risk of harmful political debate is minimised. At this stage, the government is carefully considering feedback from its public consultation, and to those of you who have been involved, I thank you. There is much anticipation from parts of the community about better protections and outcomes in this space, and it's the stories and feedback from so many in the community that drives my determination to deliver an outcome that is consistent with the unarguable proposition that every Victorian, without exception, deserves to be safe, supported and equal. On this stage last year, many may remember that I foreshadowed my priority to deal with Victoria's bail settings and their obvious disproportionate impact on particular cohorts, including Aboriginal people, women, children, those experiencing poverty and people with disabilities, many who have been victims of crime themselves. I'm pleased to report that the Bail Amendment Act 2023 will be commencing on the 25th of March this year. The amendments in the Act will focus on a stringent bail test for more serious offending, whilst importantly reducing unnecessary remand for those accused of low-level offending. These people pose little risk to community safety, and the settings did not reflect that. But now we have sensible and necessary reforms, and I acknowledge that many people in the crowd today patiently and persistently pushed for those changes. And whilst not landing everyone's personal desires, which is usually where I end up landing, I am proud of what has been achieved and what this will deliver. This year, Victoria is working on legislation to raise the age of criminal responsibility from 10 to 12. And the development of an appropriate alternative services model to support raising the age further to 14. The staged pathway to reform balances the medical evidence about children's development and calls from the community to ensure that reforms are implemented in a safe, effective and sustainable way. Ultimately, these reforms are about helping young people and their families address the causes of problematic behaviour, reducing recidivism and making sure our community feels safe and is safe. Victoria has one of the lowest rates of young people in custody in the nation. It's something we should be proud of. It ultimately shows that many of our interventions and programs that government, agencies and community organisations are focused on delivering. As members of the legal profession, as judicial officers, as people vested in the fundamentals of the law, you know only too well that there are no shortcuts in justice. There's no room for labels that might get headlines but zero results. You simply have to do the work, which includes consulting with the experts, the stakeholders, those working in the system, those with lived experience of the system, and important, listening to those who feel the system let them down. The Police Minister and I are working very closely with the Minister for Youth Justice, who is finalising the Youth Justice Bill, which proposes reforms to the youth justice system, providing a graduated response to offending behaviour, as well as bringing a greater accountability across the system to prevent and reduce offending by children and young people. We're also taking the opportunity to ensure the bail settings are considering the relevant factors particular to children, appropriately responding to risk, and that any conditions and orders designed to protect the community and keep young people on track are not ignored. Of course, I know that this audience understands that government has a responsibility through a range of services to ensure that we're giving kids the best start and to avoid them coming into contact with the justice system. And our government is focused on those. We have programs like Free Kinder, education engagement programs, mental health support, investment in child protection, and these all play a huge role. But the reality is that there will always be a need for the courts and correction systems to be a checkpoint, as an opportunity to respond to crime, break the cycle of crime and prevent further and repeated crime from occurring. And this is where my and other collective efforts are being directed. Speaking of the courts, it is important to the government that Victorians have the best possible access to justice regardless of where they live. And as you'd appreciate, I get around the state a lot, and ensuring that people can access services is something that I'm particularly focused on. But infrastructure does play an important part in accessibility. Anyone here who has not visited the Bendigo Law Courts, I urge you to do so. It is an amazing facility. It's truly beautiful. It's equipped for operational excellence, offering multi-jurisdictional courts and key service agencies under one roof. But once you check it out, you're probably going to start checking out the local real estate to see if you can move there to work there as well. It's truly wonderful. Another impressive milestone was reached in December at the topping out ceremony to celebrate the roof going on the Wyndham Law Courts. I didn't know what a topping out ceremony was. It was my first one I think I've attended, but it's when the roof or the final level goes on a building, and the Wyndham Law Courts is enormous. It is going to be a centrepiece for the West. It's going to provide an opportunity to service Melbourne's rapidly growing suburbs out there. I would like to take the opportunity to congratulate the wonderful hosts and wonderful organisations. It's been so supportive of me in my role as attorney, but I really was impressed by the publication of the first volume of The Pulse in August 2023, the Public Understanding of Law Survey. It was a deeply insightful project that has provided and will continue to provide vital data which helps us understand the barriers that people experience to accessing legal assistance in Victoria. I personally took a lot away from the presentation. I was actually surprised by a lot of the findings in relation to attitudes and experiences of people experiencing the law, which I think is in itself an example of its value. I would certainly encourage people to check it out on the website, and I think we might hear a little bit about it later on this morning. In closing, I would like to express that I'm very proud of the reforms that we have implemented over the past 12 months, and I look forward to seeing this agenda delivered and the way that it will achieve positive differences to the community. Thank you so much for attending this morning. I do sincerely thank those in the legal sector for your dedication, your professionalism, and your consistent hard work. And I really mean this. The longer I'm in the role, the more time I have to see firsthand your commitment and drive to improving the justice system. It's inspiring, it's challenging, and it motivates me. I've got a quick list just of people that I continue to work with throughout the year, and I know they use it as an opportunity to bring people to share their views with me. So obviously the VLF events, the CLSC Federation bringing all the CLCs together, the LIV putting me in front of law firms, the Bar Council, VLA, and of course the courts always welcoming me to attend and hide up the back. I try and be like the mystery AG, but I think I'm not having so much successes of that. So apologies if you see me pop up in the back of your courtroom. I'm really just there to learn. But for all of you, please keep on doing what you are doing. I appreciate it, and Victorians rely on you. So thank you so much for your time, and enjoy the breakfast this morning.
This is what happens when you don't get your pages organised well enough in advance. Apologies. Hi everyone, I'm Lynn Holtain. I'm the Executive Director of the Victoria Law Foundation, and once again it is brilliant to have so many of you with us this morning, and particularly to have the attorney. She inspires us in new ways each year. This year we are inspired to develop a Laneway Festival. Watch out, 2025, it could be a whole new thing. We'll get Ro Allen onto it, apparently. In addition, I think the attorney mentioned the Pulse survey, well, the Pulse, Public Understanding of Law survey, and that we launched Volume 1 in August. We will launch Volume 2 this morning. So please stick around and wait for remarks from Professor Nigel Balmer, who will give you a very quick overview of that work. But it is the next stage. It's all about capability, which I can promise you is a very exciting prospect. So the beginning of the year, when we're all fresh and ready and feeling revived, is a particularly useful time, I think, to start thinking about well-being, because we need to hold this mood right through till December, and we all know what a sincere challenge that is. I also know that it's on the agenda for the regulator this year, and it's my very great pleasure to introduce her, Fiona McClay, CEO and Commissioner with the Victorian Legal Services Board and Commission, to make a few remarks.
Better? Yes. Hey, good morning, everyone. Such a great event, and it is lovely to be genuinely appreciating the weather and not trying to convince ourselves that it's really much warmer than it actually is. It is also always a privilege to be here on Wurundjeri land in Naarm, Melbourne, and I also want to acknowledge the traditional owners and custodians of land, and also to acknowledge the really great welcome to country from the Jiri dancers, and echo Mandy's thanks to you all for the work that you do as lawyers. As the attorney has said, the work that lawyers do is vital and the community depends on it, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. I think also it's important to acknowledge the results of the referendum last year. I personally was disappointed by that result, but my team and I are redoubling our efforts to recognise and respect the First Peoples of this land. We're finalising our Reconciliation Action Plan at the moment and continuing to provide funding to support Aboriginal controlled organisations, including the Aboriginal Legal Service and JIRA. Both of those organisations provide not just services and support, but also are powerful voices for justice for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. So it's the start of 2024, and I think globally it feels like it's going to be a momentous year. Almost half of the population of the planet will cast a vote this year. 64 countries are holding elections this year, quite extraordinary, and it's actually a record. But it feels a bit like, despite so many people exercising their democratic rights, in some places around the world, the pillars of liberal democracy feel a bit creaky. As I reflected on this, it made me very glad to live in Australia, which has such a robust democracy, and also determined to do what I can to support the integrity of the rule of law. And I know that this aspect of liberal democracy is especially dear to everyone here this morning. It's really what lawyers commit to when they become practitioners. So I wanted to very briefly mention 3 ways in which we are going to try and support the rule of law in Victoria over the coming year. Lynn has mentioned lawyer wellbeing, and that's a really important focus for us. Lawyers in Victoria conduct themselves to a very high standard. There's over 27,000 lawyers registered in Victoria, but we receive complaints about just 3.6% of lawyers. But ethical breaches do occur, and the consequences can be devastating, not just for individuals, but it does affect the reputation of the system as a whole. And one contributor to ethical breaches is stress and poor wellbeing. So that's why anyone who cares about the law should care about the wellbeing of lawyers. I think it's good that the problem is no longer unmentionable, as Justice Michael Kirby put it in a 1995 article called Judicial Stress, the Unmentionable. We now can talk about our wellbeing in polite company, but I think the challenge is to move from talk to action. How can we change the sector from one where a certain level of mental ill health is not only tolerated but perhaps expected, to one in which a positive focus on wellbeing is the expectation and the norm? My team have been working to identify factors that lead to mental ill health in the law, and we've set up a community of practice on lawyer wellbeing. This is made up of a group of experts, psychologists, organisational health and safety people who are working in the legal profession and are focused on identifying system-wide interventions to have the greatest impact on wellbeing. One issue is vicarious trauma. The reality is that despite the advances in artificial intelligence, lawyers are not yet robots. And as humans, no matter what area of law you work in, if you have traumatised clients or you're absorbing traumatic content, you risk taking on some of that trauma yourself. Another factor that contributes to ill health is sexual harassment, which continues to be too high in the profession. Those of you who've been attending the breakfast over the years will have heard me talk about this, and indeed 5 years ago launching the work that my office does in this area. It's work that continues, it's not something we've forgotten about. We've got an online anonymous reporting tool which has been active for a number of years and has been very helpful in helping people bring their experiences to us. We've been investigating and prosecuting lawyers, and I'm pleased to say that now when a person is put forward for silk or for appointment to the Magistrates Court, my office is approached to find out whether there's any history of misconduct, including credible accusations of sexual harassment. And soon this will apply to appointments to the county and Supreme Courts. We're also continuing to research in this area, and we're partnering with the University of Melbourne and ANU this year on a new research project to better understand the relationship between the culture of the profession and the wellbeing of lawyers. Keep an eye out for that, because we'll be encouraging you all to participate in an online survey later in the year. A second way we're working to uphold the integrity of the law in Victoria is by drawing your attention to cybersecurity. A cybercrimes report in Australia every 6 minutes. It's pretty scary. How long have we been here this morning? There's been a lot of cybercrime happen while we've been having our coffees. That's a 23% rise on the previous financial year. If you lock your office when you go home at the end of the day, but you don't take cybersecurity seriously, then you're missing this much bigger threat. Hackers want money and they want information that they can turn into money, and lawyers have both of these things. So cyber safe practice is a professional competency for all lawyers, and we've published some resources to help you with this. We really expect practitioners to have multi-factor authentication, strong unique passwords, and regular security and software updates. If you haven't got these in place, skip your second coffee this morning, go straight back to your office and sort that out. The final factor that I wanted to mention is also technology related, and that's artificial intelligence. There's two risks, I think, as we think about that topic. The first is that we take an uncritical acceptance and embrace of AI, and the second is to underestimate its potential, both for good and ill. In perhaps a good news story, last year, global law firm Linklaters put 50 hard legal questions to a number of large language models, including Google Bard and ChatGPT. The good news is that the AI got most of them wrong, and in several cases they hallucinated facts and citations that didn't even exist. So that's a cautionary tale and perhaps comforting, but I think it would be very foolish to think that AI won't improve. The Linklaters report continues that if AI continues its current rate of advance, one of these large language models may well pass the benchmark next time around. That would irrevocably change the nature of legal services. Despite that, I think that in some ways technology changes nothing. The professional and ethical obligations on lawyers remain the same, whatever tools we're using. But remember that at the moment, those large language models that underpin ChatGPT and others are optimised for fluency and not accuracy. They need to be checked and checked again, so your legal knowledge is vital and must be applied if you're using it. But keep an open mind, there's positive use cases for AI, and we see lots of potential, particularly in the access to justice and legal needs space. So I think in some ways a challenging year, 2024, for liberal democracy and the rule of law, and therefore for the role of lawyers. We want to continue to support you all as we face these challenges together, continuing to think about risks and challenges facing lawyers, to provide resources and guidance in the face of new technologies and threats, and to work towards a profession in which there is a positive focus on well-being, which is the expectation and the norm. So I'm looking forward to another year of working with you all and making sure that our corner of the democratic world is moving forward with greater integrity, trustworthiness and justice for everyone. Thanks.
Great to see you, Fiona, and thank you ever so much for those remarks. As I mentioned, today is a landmark day for the Victoria Law Foundation. We launched the second volume of analysis from the Public Understanding of Law Survey, aka PULSE. And you might be aware, as has been mentioned by the AG already, that the first volume looked at what kinds of civil problems Victorians had, where and who were having them, and what kinds of clusters came together in terms of civil problems. This one looks at what people understand about our law, their skills and their resources in navigating everyday legal problems. For all of us, committed as we are to serving Victorians through the law, these are critical insights. It means we have sound evidence for the first time on where people are at and consequently how we can better meet their legal needs. This means we can respond more effectively in helping to resolve their legal problems, which also means, therefore, that the system functions better and is more efficient. The architect of the Public Understanding of Law Survey is our Research Director, Professor Nigel Balmer, and I welcome him to give you a sense of the second volume and a teaser so that you can once again race back to your office once you've dealt with the cyber threat and go online to look at Pulse Volume 2. Nigel.
thanks for having me. And to all those who helped make this project happen, including Lynn, colleagues at the VLF, the VLSB+C, VLA, my co-authors, including the brilliant Hugh MacDonald, who's with us today, and of course 6,008 survey respondents who freely gave their time to share some deeply personal experiences. So the Pulse looks at how Victorians experience legal problems, what we call a legal needs survey. Now, that's not a new idea. People have been doing these things since the 1930s. What is new is the way in which the Pulse captures legal capability alongside legal need. By legal capability, I mean the array of knowledge, skills, and attributes people need to make decisions about whether and how to use the justice system. And as the report maintains, legal capability really matters. The first volume of The Pulse that Lynn referred to, we published last year, focused on the experience of problems. It showed a very high volume of unmet legal need, even when people got legal advice, and the extent to which legal needs were met related to both who you were and the issues you faced. It showed that inequality of justice is absolutely real, and inequality in the experience of legal problems forms a significant part of it. The second volume that we launched today builds on this by taking the most in-depth look at legal capability ever. Legal capability matters because poor legal skills, low legal confidence, negative attitudes to law, all limit your ability to deal with problems, get the help that you need, and extract value from advice. In short, it limits the prospects of just resolution. And just like problem experience, legal capability is unequally distributed with clear links to disadvantage. It sits right alongside inequality of experience as another layer of inequality of justice. Consequently, understanding capability is absolutely key if you want to tailor to meet legal needs. It can inform how decisions are made and communicated, form and intensity of services, and the extent to which you might draw upon complementary services. It can help to reshape provision, optimize resources, and ultimately democratize justice. Recognizing differences in needs and capabilities and responding accordingly is the essence of people-centered justice. And it's a shared challenge. It extends to publicly funded legal services, private practice, legal institutions, and well beyond the justice system. Anyway, while I hope you enjoy this report, there's also much to come, and Hugh and I will be turning our attention to Volume 3 very soon. However, it's already evident that if access to justice policy seeks to democratize justice, then attitudes to justice really matter. Perceptions of inaccessible, inadequate, or unfair services and processes don't just inhibit use, but feed into a cycle of worsening attitudes. Essentially, they corrode confidence in the rule of law. As I say, far too often, for many people's liking, structures of the justice system are best developed from the bottom up, but the responsibility for the operation of a system able to respond to diverse needs that facilitates access, ensures quality of process and outcome, and promotes these positive attitudes sits right here at the top, but I'm sure it's a challenge that you're all up for. That's about all I have to say. I hope you enjoy the report as much as you did your breakfast, and I hope to catch up with many of you soon in my soon-to-be new role at the VLSB+C. So thank you very much.
Thank you ever so much, Nigel. And 2 down, 1 to go in terms of the big Pulse reports. But I would love to take this opportunity in front of our gathered crowd today to thank you most sincerely for all that you've done at the Victoria Law Foundation in building our research function and delivering the research that we already have out there in the world, and there's so much more to come. You have built a robust, unflinching approach to evidence gathering around the law in Victoria, and for that we are eternally grateful, as are the entire Victorian populace, because this will make a difference. And we wish you absolutely every success in what I will now refer to as the VLSB+C. He starts in a couple of weeks as their new head of research. Well, as you've heard, capability sits at the very core of Pulse, and in particular in this second report. Capability is also the unifying idea at the VLF. Through our work in schools, events, Law Week, days like today, grant making, and all the other aspects of our research, we are deeply committed to improving capability so that people develop the knowledge and the access to the resources to understand and navigate their justice system effectively. Mainly, we work through you, which is our opportunity today to thank you ever so much for all that you do and all our potential to amplify the critical messages through your work. Across the profession and the sector more broadly, building capability with rigorous research and connections with schools and the public and training and grants, all through you, help us to understand our communities better and deliver on justice and access to justice. We've got a whole lot of stuff planned for this year, including, of course, Pulse Mark III, which we'll keep you informed about. But we're also launching a new research project called Measure for Measure, which very many of you will hear much more about in the very near future. This is looking at what is working on the ground to deliver access to justice in meeting the very diverse legal needs and capabilities of Victorians. So stay tuned for more on that. And if you've got programs that might fit in terms of what's working on the ground, we would love to hear from you. It would be remiss of me to not take this opportunity to remind you that Law Week is just around the corner and that registrations are now open. So dream up your event, and we look forward to your participation in the program towards the end of May. And also our community legal grants open in early March. So if you've got ideas on that score, we would also be delighted to talk to you further. Finally, I strongly recommend that you go online and have a look at Pulse 2. It's an exceptional piece of work. It is world first in terms of the insight that it gives us into the capacities and capabilities of Victorians to resolve legal problems. It prompts us to think really carefully about the people we serve and how we can do that better and more effectively. Thank you again so much for coming, and particularly to our volunteers this morning, Victorian Women's Lawyers, Victoria Legal Aid, the Victorian Bar, College of Law and the Law Institute, and of course to my splendid team at the VLF, Nikita, Jackie, Isabel, Leon, and so ably led this morning by Vicky. Now people, you can rest, and we don't have to get up at 5 a.m. tomorrow morning. So thank you all very much indeed for coming, and to our people online and the live stream. Have a splendid day, and as we were reminded first thing this morning, go well and go with purpose. Thanks.